Ah, there you are. I was expecting you. Let us begin.
In the age of ancients, before the founding of the flame, existence was a different construct. Life and death were not forces, and so beings simply existed in an endless constant, everlasting, until they did not. With the advent of fire came death, disease, decay. It swept across the land like a tide, devouring all in its path. But what can be done with what remains? It is for this purpose that the catacombs were constructed. Snaking down into the earth from the base of the Firelink Shrine, these winding halls were once the domain of the Gravelord Nito, Lord of the Dead. The bones of the fallen were his puppets, ready to carry out his commands and strike down any invaders. But when Gwyn linked the flame, he defied the very will of nature, and in doing so gave birth to the undead curse. Those marked with the dark sign could no longer truly die, instead being reawoken at bonfire. And so we must ask, what power holds the Lord of Death when death itself is cheated by so many? Perhaps this is the reason that now all he does is slumber in his tomb, essentially redundant in a world drained of death. But there may also be another explanation. The skeletons of the catacombs appear to no longer serve the Gravelord, and instead we can find hollows patrolling the halls, necromancers wielding skull lanterns that produce flame. These mages now hold the true power in these crypts, for any skeletal warriors controlled by these necromancers cannot be slain while their master lives, save for with the use of a weapon imbibed with the power of the gods. But who are these necromancers, and how did they come to be here? For centuries, the catacombs have held a connection with the clerics of the Way of White, many of whom travelled to Lordran in pilgrimage to these ancient resting grounds in search of the art of kindling. An ancient ritual that allows the user to stoke a bonfire with his or her own humanity, in an imitation of Gwyn's linking of the first flame. But not all clerics who leave for this place return. Between the skeletal guardians, the treacherous cliff faces, and some of the more unsavoury denizens, these halls have claimed many of these holy pilgrims. And when we look at the robes these casters wear, we see a striking similarity to those the clerics don. Perhaps these once holy warriors became lost in the maze of graves and found themselves hollowing. Around halfway down, we can find one of Lordran's more sinister characters lurking, hovering over one of the levers that control the bridges. Trusty Patches is a seemingly charming character with an intense dislike for clerics.
They're all the same, those rotten clerics.
He has a habit of turning up whenever there's trouble, or perhaps rather, creating trouble wherever he turns up. Any passing adventurers would be wise to keep their eyes open around this devious trickster. Descending through the crumbling tunnels, the graves appear to get more grand. The alcoves give way to ornate stone coffins, the bodies less densely packed in, perhaps signifying that those buried deeper were esteemed warriors or noblemen of importance. In the depths of the caverns we can find a rather unusual blacksmith, a skeleton known only as Vamos. Unusually driven, he has no interest in any distractions that may draw him away from his craft.
Be gone with you. You'll spoil my focus.
He seems to hold an interesting secret, though. A golden horned helm, made for an ancient royal line, wielded by a humble blacksmith. There seems to be more to this, but it's a tale Vamos will not share.
I've told you I have nothing to discuss. Having to offer, it's my smithing and nothing more.
Pressing on, a giant coffin is the next thing we find. Perhaps it was once the resting place of some truly gargantuan being, but it has since been repurposed, reformed into a makeshift lair. Pinwheel, a necromancer, has made this place his home. With mountains of books and test subjects littering his makeshift lab, he works on draining the power of the Gravelord and storing it within enchanted masks, carved with different faces into the form of a family. It is unclear as to Pinwheel's motivations for this. Perhaps he merely hungered for the power that Nito wielded, seeking to take his place as the Lord of Death. What is clear is that he had successfully drawn out the secret of the Rite of Kindling, now wielding it himself. Beyond his dwelling, the utter darkness descends. The gloom is impenetrable without at least some form of light source to guide the path. The tombs of the giants lay ahead, their toppled coffins dotting the pathways, whilst their skeletal remains roam, giant swords and giant bows, ready to crush any pillagers that have penetrated this far. But some of the skeletons here are strange, contorted creatures who prowl on all fours, lunging and striking like giant dogs. Was this a different form that ancient giants once took? Or was it some sort of beast used by them in battle, so honoured as to be buried beside their masters? It's even possible that these creatures were never creatures at all, could merely be an amalgamation of different creatures constructed by Nito to ward off invaders. Few have ever made it this deep, though, and even fewer have returned with their lives and sanity intact. Long ago, the Way of White sent a paladin down into these tombs, wielding a mighty club and a magical shield. Paladin Leroy was sent on a secret mission. He was the first undead amongst their ranks, and so he was perfectly suited to such a dangerous journey. But even the most righteous of warriors are susceptible to corruption, and for Leroy it was the power of humanity that drew him, leading him to invade and attack any who travelled too deep, be they friend or foe. And so it is that he was slain, his body left to rot amidst the decay of Nito's coffin. At the very bottom of the tomb we can find the entrance to Nito's chambers, the entrance boarded up with a primitive barricade of wooden stakes and planks. It appears a group of skeletons had gathered here to pray to their sleeping lord, though the barrier is likely the work of necromancers that came after, an attempt to keep the Gravelord contained while they drained his power, or perhaps to keep his followers out to hinder any rescue attempts. Whatever the case, Nito has not been left without power, his mighty miasma still capable of stripping flesh from bone. And so it was that Nito's very loyalty to Gwyn proved his undoing, for the undead curse rendered him increasingly obsolete, until he became nothing more than fuel for the next flame. The one who used his power to control the dead like puppets was being used himself, on a stage far grander than the gloomy catacombs to which he was accustomed. And this, his final scene.
Now go. Whatever you do, do not crack and go hollow, lest my time spent on you be wasted.